And I genuinely think that I've reached the time of life where I'd like to think that what I'm doing is making a difference. And and I think that doing what we're doing here, if we're able to achieve what we want to achieve, it will make such a difference.
Welcome back, everyone. Appreciate you hopping on for another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. Joined here by Andy Field, who I had the pleasure of meeting with at Supercrowd LA here in Santa Monica. Andy's based in the UK, flew out for the conference, and is an executive lead steering committee for Gecka, the Global Equity Crowdfunding Association, which now has an alliance partnership with the Crowdfund Professional Association, which I'm currently a board member of. But Andy's doing it on the global level. So we're going to talk about Europe. We're going to talk about the ecosystem. We're going to talk about the different countries and how all these different equity crowdfunding platforms interact. Going to share notes on regulated investment crowdfunding here in the US and really the future of where this space is all going. I should mention that Andy also holds the role of Daxi Chain, head of partnerships. So a lot to discuss here. Andy, thank you so much for taking the time to hop on the podcast. I know our time zones had to match here, and I've been excited to have you on the pod.
Thanks, Jason. It's absolute pleasure to be here. And I nearly said good afternoon, good evening, but it's good morning for you. So,
Yeah.
but I'm just getting used to the jet lag. It was great. It was a great event that we met at last week in Santa Monica. Really great venue. Met some fantastic people. The Supercrowd team, Supercrowd LA team. It was so well run, and yeah, just an absolute pleasure and a real learning curve for me actually, having not met so many people in the the crowdfunding scene in the United States before. It was fantastic. Yeah, really. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, that was a great event, put on by Devin Thorpe, of course. Very impressed by everything he does. He's really a strong advocate for the whole community, for the industry. And it was a good turnout of many of the top portals, agencies, lawyers in the space, accountants, quarterbacks. Those were some of my favorite presentations. So
Yeah.
that was a good event here in the US to attend. And having that conversation in person with you said we definitely need to do this for viewers, listeners. Yeah. Glad it's actually happening.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Yeah, it was everyone who's sort of anyone in the industry was there, and it was a real good mix, like you say, of different stakeholders, and that was particularly interesting to me. I mean, as in, do you want me to give you a little bit of a background now about sort of what I do and how I
Let's
operate?
start with you. Yes, exactly.
Cool.
How did you get involved in this world of equity crowdfunding? You could take it as far back as you'd like for where your career started, but want to familiarize the audience with you, and we'll get into the space right after.
Sure. Yeah. Well, at my heart, I'm a marketer like yourself. I've been involved in marketing for longer than I care to remember, really, 25, 30 years. But it's always been centered around financial services here in the UK, and particularly regulated financial services. So I've worked in the regulated financial services industry from a marketing capacity and a product capacity for a long time. And I like to think that I've gained quite a lot of knowledge of how the regulator works here in the UK, how the regulator comes on board when they're starting to regulate new industries, which is particularly interesting. And yeah, it's given me a background as to what you can and can't do from a marketing perspective when you're operating within that regulated industry. I've been involved in crowdfunding, so to speak, for just over 3 years now. So my day job is actually, you mentioned it earlier, I head up the partnerships at Daxi Chain. And Daxi Chain is essentially, it's a tech company which builds cross-border infrastructure for crowdfunding. So it connects crowdfunding platforms from different countries, or not from different countries, actually. It doesn't matter whether they're cross-border or not, but obviously it can connect cross-border. Allows them to share deals, allows them to share investors. And it tackles the technical and compliance infrastructure that's needed to enable essentially what is borderless capital raising. And through working on this with Daxi Chain, that's when I sort of realized that we as a collective actually realized that the industry needs to come together to tackle some of the problems that prevent borderless crowdfunding. We didn't think that should be done by an entity, so to speak, or a commercial entity such as Daxi Chain. It needs to be a neutral body, something industry-wide and something globally to bring stakeholders together. And that was the insight that kind of sparked the formation of Gecka. And I was asked to lead the creation of Gecka, and then obviously to lead the steering committee. We decided it would be run by an independent steering committee of industry experts. So that's what we did. We started that last May. It's totally independent from Daxi Chain, but obviously has some links. But it's informed by the same challenges that Daxi Chain see in the real world. And so we quite quickly recruited. We told people about our idea. I sort of approached them, told them what we wanted to do and why we wanted to do it. And we got some really positive responses, actually. And I genuinely can't think of anyone who turned around and said, well, that's just a load of rubbish. It's just pointless. What's the point in doing that? Everybody could see why we'd want to do this. Everybody could also see that there are extreme challenges in our way to making this happen. But we did get people on board, and our steering committee now consists of people from right across the globe. We've got steering committee members from the US, from the UK, from Europe, from Australia. I'm actually looking at growing our steering committee over the next 2 to 3 months to make sure that we've got each of the jurisdictions that has viable crowdfunding platforms in the world represented. So I'm looking to have sort of between 10 and 15 members of the steering committee, but I want to geographically have members of that crowdfunding the steering committee to be represented right across the globe. So Africa included, Asia included, and everywhere else as well. So we really do get opinion and insight from across the globe, and also each area of the world has an opportunity to have an impact as well. So that's kind of our mission at the moment. We've now got GECA stands for the Global Equity Crowdfunding Alliance. It's not a trade association. We think of it more as a talking shop, where we have people getting together to share ideas, to share challenges, and to try and come up with research that will potentially be able to take to some of the policymakers, the lawmakers, and the regulators, and say to them, look, there's some things here that that are potentially stopping innovation. They're stopping investment opportunities, and they needn't do. So that's what we're doing. Gecka is a global non-profit alliance of equity crowdfunding stakeholders. It's built to unite everyone: platforms, regulators, investors, advocates, any stakeholder in the industry. But the overall aim is to create this sort of harmonized and borderless environment for raising and investing capital.
I love it. Global Equity Crowdfunding Alliance. When I've been to events in Europe, and I know I've shared these stories with you well before Santa Monica and in Santa Monica, but when I've been to conferences in Europe, I've always been overwhelmed by how many representatives there are, diplomats from various countries. I went to the World Congress Angel Investors Forum, over 30 different countries represented, including the president of Croatia, head of economic affairs, various titles, countries in Africa, the Middle East, all over Europe, an insigniary around it. I'm not used to that here in the U.S. Maybe we have a governor speak, maybe Web3, we've had the president, we've had different people talk at these different events, but it's a different ecosystem in Europe. And you're talking about challenges, you're talking about policy. How do you get that done? How do you work with policymakers for multiple countries at once and get them to have that cross-border collaboration?
That's a really interesting question. It's certainly going to be one of the challenges that we're going to face with our relatively new alliance of stakeholders, which is growing sort of daily, by the way, which is really good news. But actually, Europe's a really good example of how some harmonization across borders has already been achieved, because Europe has, to a certain extent, got a harmonized regulatory framework now for members of the EU called ECSPR, and I can't remember exactly what that stands for, but I'm sure if you you'll see. But essentially, that is the harmonized regulatory framework for members of the EU, and it's
EU.
Yeah, so that's EU only. That doesn't include the UK, obviously. But it does include the vast majority of the countries within Europe. So, and if they're operating under that framework, that essentially means that operating cross-border becomes so much easier, because of the fact that the regulations, the same rules and regulations apply no matter where you are in the EU. So to a certain extent, that's really good news. Now, that took a very, very long time to both write and develop, and also to implement. And I'm talking years actually for that to happen.
Sure.
But it did happen. It's currently being implemented in the various countries across Europe, and there are some of them are taking longer than others to do, and there has been some criticism. Not criticism, but commentary really on the fact that it's taking such a long time, and people looking into some of the reasons as to why that's the case. Is it the fact that it costs too much from a compliance perspective to make all of the changes required in terms of licensing fees, that kind of thing? But I guess all I'm saying is, from our perspective, it's really encouraging to see that it can be done. The harmonization can occur. The rules now in, for example, France are the same as the rules in Ireland, for example. So that's really encouraging, and I think it's that kind of harmonization that we'd love to achieve in our sort of utopian vision of global equity crowdfunding. Being able to have a deal in Singapore offered on a platform in, I don't know, Portugal would be fantastic. But we're not there at the moment. But that's the kind of thing that we're looking to try and do over a period of time.
It's gonna happen. I'm glad to hear you guys are steering it. I could tell you here in the U.S., I've had Jenny Casson, president of the CFPA. I've had Sherwood, Woody Neese. They were both very involved spearheading the Jobs Act, Title III, Reg CF, the creation and implementation. They were at the White House signing after, I think it was 435 days of lobbying, but the White House signing was back in 2012. It didn't go into effect until May 16th, 2016. Definitely May 2016. Have counterparts in the industry that are ready to celebrate on May 16th. And we had advertising live day one. I had worked on Reg D 506C campaigns. So we were already soliciting accredited investors, but Reg CF. And then I've seen the evolution where March 2021, the cap for Reg CF went from 1.07 million to 5 million. That could be raised at that same time. Regulation A plus, different type of filing, but to both retail and accredited investors went from 50 to 75 million. And I know we're working on policy here with the CFPA. There's a tax incentive that we're hoping gets included in the next tax bill.
Yes, I heard about that.
Yeah.
Much like they do in Europe. Yeah.
Yes. We're following in your footsteps, and we're hoping that allows for mainstream adoption, if you will. I feel there's a significant lack of awareness. There's about 8,700 Reg CFs to date. I think there's 24 million some odd small businesses in the U.S. A lot more of those entities could be using these exemptions, these fundraising vehicles. So do you find it's a similar theme in the UK, EU,
I think
surrounding markets?
I think that bit about awareness is something that is absolutely apparent on a global level. I actually think there's a lot of things that are apparent on a global level. We've recently published the Gecka manifesto, and if you go onto the website, which I'll mention sort of at the end, I'll tell you where to download it if people want to have a look at that, because it just sort of summarizes what we're trying to do. And we're trying to fix the problem, and we think the problem globally is I think it's probably the same in the States. It's certainly the same in Europe and across the globe. And it's essentially a broken system for investors, entrepreneurs, and the platform. So investors are locked out of global opportunities. They sometimes they'll face unnecessary limits on participation, lack of liquidity, that kind of thing. Entrepreneurs struggle to raise the capital, and often due to regulatory reasons and marketing restrictions, as I'm sure you'll testify to.
Sure.
And probably outdated investment models. And platforms tend to operate in isolation. So they're unable to scale beyond their sort of domestic markets and restricted in how they promote their investment opportunities. And I think that kind of results in a lot of unrealized potential. And that's what we think that creating a borderless environment will be able to fix. We think it'll fix the fact that we think it'll help realize some of this unrealized potential. So what we're kind of aiming to do with we've called it Crowd 2.0, right?
Yep.
And the vision of that is that we have a borderless crowdfunding market. We have a unified global ecosystem. So that means, aligning industry standards across the globe so operations can run a lot smoother. We have a thriving secondary market as well. So that would solve liquidity challenges and increasing investor confidence. And the regulations become smarter, more harmonized. We've already touched upon that, to enable scale to be achieved responsibly and obviously compliantly. But educating investors is absolutely key to that as well. Not just the educating of investors, actually, educating founders as well, that this is an opportunity that exists for them to raise capital for their business. We don't think that's done enough. And I think awareness in that sense is something that is an issue globally. And we honestly feel that we'd love Gecka as a group of stakeholders would love to be able to contribute to that whole education piece. And I'm sure I'd like to think, would advocate for that as well.
Absolutely.
The education piece across all of those stakeholders is so important for the industry.
Absolutely. And I love the concept of a borderless environment. We've worked on over 500 Reg CF, Reg D, Reg A campaigns, investor marketing campaigns. And we've worked with issuers on extensions for Canada and for other markets. Okay. We're going to use a different funnel, different set of targeting for the ads, for the outreach that's going into content funnels. It's multiple touch points before investors convert. We build these environments with content funnels. And if there was that, borderless environment, there's just that much more potential. You can have a global investor base. And as a marketer, can speak to what that means to have those ambassadors, user owners in many cases, or just owner enthusiasts who are constantly reposting the content on a worldwide stage.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so I know at the moment there's nothing preventing foreign nationals from investing in deals that are listed on US crowdfunding platforms. But it's quite difficult to do that. And it's quite a laborious process. And I think in terms of the marketing, like you said, it's going to create a lot of extra work, and a lot of extra funds will be needed to obviously, to cover the costs of that work. Like you said, it would involve completely different marketing campaigns, different funnels, and all that kind of thing. So we think that platforms being able to gain exposure to investors beyond their local market will, dramatically affect the sort of thing, increase the risk for the issuers, the reach for the issuers, for a start, which is obviously a massive benefit. And then for the platforms themselves, they're able to offer a wide range of investment opportunities without needing to source every single deal themselves. So them doing their own marketing, but potentially still be able to receive an income from the successful completion of those deals. So I think our message is really, to sum it up, I think our message would be, we need to start thinking about collaboration across the industry rather than competition.
Agreed.
And that's probably a bit of a shift in the mindset for the industry, both on a local level and a global level. In fact, to be honest, we'd probably go a little bit further and say that we need to collaborate to compete, because if you think about it, what we're doing here is we're competing with other. We're looking as an industry. We're looking for investment. We're looking for money to come into the industry to invest in these startup businesses, often startup businesses with very entrepreneurial founders, and we want people to put their money into those. There are other things that they can do that investors can do, and they could probably do it in a far easier way, with less restrictions and less laborious regulatory things that they have to do in order to take part in regulated crowdfunding. So we think that actually the competition shouldn't be amongst people in our industry. If anything, the competition is with the potential other opportunities for investment that put themselves out there to investors. We need, and that boils back down again to what we were talking about there, which is education.
Yes.
And telling people that this is a great way to if you want to invest, you can do it really, really responsibly, and equity crowdfunding is a fantastic way to do it, and it can be incredibly interesting for the investor as well. The investors, what's better than investing in something you're passionate about? So, I think that's where that's how I'd sum up what we're trying to do in terms of changing the industry, is to say to the industry, look, let's collaborate here. Let's not compete. Let's collaborate to compete.
I was about to say, I like the way you put that, collaborate to compete. And we definitely look at it, at least different groups I collaborate with regularly, as a rising tides lift all ships scenario, where we should all be locking arms to tell this story of regulated investment crowdfunding, the power of audience, the value of the crowd, and what that means long term for everyone involved. And I look at all sides of the table. I put a spotlight on the issuers, the founders, and many are startup growth stage companies. They historically don't have a great success rate, and in many cases because they're undercapitalized. So being able to get that access to funding from potential customer audiences, from as I mentioned, groups that can be sharing on a regular basis what they're doing. The other side of the table, of course, investors. So being able to get that deal flow and the stories told of early stage private equity investments, the potential of valuation growth, and it's happening. I mean, there's issuers we work with that started $20 million valuation, now over $3 billion valuation. So what that means for an investor, and in comparison to other public market investments, other things that are directly available to them, it should definitely be balanced. And going back to education, into a high risk, high return section percentage of the portfolio, so it needs to have the right guidance there. But at the same time, there are these restrictions, many which are very good, I support. But I've always found it funny, and I've heard this analogy brought up so many times, that Reg CF, you have to do all these extra disclosures. You want to put over $2,200 in. This stuff's risky. I don't know. Should the government allow you to do it? Meanwhile, you could walk into a casino and spend as much as you could put your whole life savings in there. So I don't know if it should be the wild, wild west or anything like that. But laws, regulations, cross-border, that make it easier for individuals to become shareholders into these companies.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the same in the UK, for example. By the way, before you actually, there are lots of things that you have to do as an investor to be able to prove that you've classified yourself correctly, and that you have the suitable knowledge. Which, look, none of us are saying we disagree with that. I think the regulatory, that's all about protecting the investor, and that should always be the case. I just think what people in our industry are looking for is that it needs to be proportional, and
proportional.
Yeah, and I think. I think that's where we probably need to have it looked at. Nobody's saying get rid of regulation. Far from it. Regulation is really, really important for the protection of the consumer, and everybody certainly associated with Gecka is very pro-regulation. It just needs to be looked at occasionally and from time to time, and things change. There's nothing to say that the rules and regulations can't change, and we think that any help that policymakers and regulators can get from organisations such as ours can only be beneficial to them. It's certainly what Eurocrowd in Europe do, for example. The UK Crowdfunding Association have a lot of airtime with the FCA in the UK, which is fantastic. I'm sure it works the same way in the States. I just think that one of the things that I learnt particularly stuck with me, actually, it came from one of your sessions. And both you and Sarah Hardwick were talking about the importance of the story behind the founders and keeping the story at the forefront of the mind of people who potentially could invest in their business, and also once they have invested, keep them reminded of what that story is and how things are going and that compelling story. I just think if you just think about how more powerful that story would become if cross-border deals were to be made easier. So the amount of people that would be interested in your particular story in your particular niche area of business, that's a powerful tool to have in your toolbox. If you're doing that in the States, there's going to be many people around the world who share exactly the same kind of passion for your industry and your idea that you just don't have access to at the moment because you either haven't targeted. I'm not saying you couldn't legally, because as we've already mentioned, in the States you probably could.
Yep.
But if that could be done in an easier way, in a far less frictionless way, again, some of those you'd unlock a lot of the sort of shortfallings at the moment that are potentially just around the corner. So yeah, again, another reason for borderless equity crowdfunding is to sort of enhance and increase the amount of people that are out there that are going to be wanting to invest in you. They just don't know about it yet.
Yes. Marketing. I look at this as a marketing exercise. How do you go after those target audiences? And I can tell you've been on the marketing side. I'll see founders get backed up with the filing process, especially if we're talking about Regulation A plus. It could be an extensive period from when they think they're going to go live and when they actually do. You then start to complicate it with, hey, what about targeting investors in these markets? And they want to get, counsel to sign off and make sure they're operating within regulation for, each country and are prepared to bring in those investors. And even just looking at the states here in the U.S., that there's minutia involved and additional steps and things that are required or need to be avoided. But marketing. What role do you believe marketing plays in these capital raises? You're a financial marketer, but just to emphasize to the audience, why is it so important to have marketing at the forefront of the strategy of a successful equity crowdfund?
Yeah, I think it's the key pillar to everything that's being done. It was one of the questions that was asked at me during a panel I was on at Supercrowd LA, as I said before. The question actually there was around more about how important is marketing when you're looking at exiting, so that actually you don't, all of your existing investors don't suddenly sell their shares. Why you want to keep them on board, right? So,
Of course.
and my answer to that was it was absolutely crucial. As crucial, the marketing at that stage and ongoing once the deal, once you've achieved your targets. You need to maintain that marketing. So the importance of marketing, I think, is kind of widely recognized in terms of actually getting your deal listed and getting ready for the crowd to come your way. And just, central to that, again, you'll know this far more than I do, is going to be what we've already spoken about, which is the story. Why are you doing this? What difference is it going to make? What is going to be the outcome of this? How's it going to change the world? People want to hear that kind of thing, and that's the kind of thing that will essentially sell them the dream of what you're trying to achieve and cause them to invest. So I think the importance of marketing from in terms of recruiting the initial investors is key, but keeping that marketing going, keeping the narrative going, giving regular updates as to how the business is going, what plans you've got coming ahead, communicating the roadmap effectively. I think that from my perspective, all falls within the marketing realm. And I think all of that needs to be maintained throughout the duration of your tenure within the business. And I don't think at any time marketing should slip. If anything, it should be the thing that you continue to ramp up on. And I think that's probably where, and I don't have any evidence of this, but anecdotally I do from other industries. A lot of people, once they sort of hit their initial goals, they tend to slack off on the marketing a little bit. They think, we've done what we need to do. Let's just let it flow, and they don't realize the power, how powerful that marketing has been and will continue to be as they continue to run the business. So, yeah, to answer your question, I think it's the crucial part of anybody looking to crowdfund their business has got to be their marketing campaign and their plan, an ongoing plan for that as well.
I think it's crucial to say, and as you did there, because I speak with too many founders who are just focused on the cost of capital, or like you said, they hit their round. Hey, we're going to take a break on marketing for a while. We don't know whether we're going to do another capital raise, and just want to focus on the product, or whatever it may be at the moment. Where like you so delicately put, It needs to continue. If we look at the top issuers, they're all serial issuers, groups that have run multiple Reg CFs, multiple Regulation A plus campaigns. Their audience keeps growing, and it's because they have those ongoing communications, the content pieces, the live events, the webinars to keep their audience abreast, to keep them excited. Social sharing to me is the ultimate form of marketing.
Yeah.
Whatever you can do to stimulate that peer-to-peer dynamic on a day-to-day basis and getting them headline-worthy announcements makes all of the difference in terms of positioning for the next capital raise or just for more market share in its own right. I think regulated investment crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding is a very, very powerful marketing strategy as a whole. Beyond just the capital, I'll see groups take on thousands of investors, all different types of partnerships and press and super users, influencers come in. I've seen merger and acquisition activity. So you get far more. I mean, the marketing campaign itself, if you're seeing a successful, capital raise take place using these vehicles, and ends up being, free at the end of the day. If the marketing had a 10x return or higher, we'll see higher on many campaigns. So I'm glad that you pointed out it has to be at the forefront. And why have you chosen to have your time, your career focused on equity crowdfunding? I mean, there's plenty of financial marketing opportunities. Why is this so important to you?
Because I actually think this industry has the power to really make a difference. And I genuinely mean that. It's not. I mean, you could put a spin on that on every financial service, couldn't you? To a certain extent, but this one for me is all about. It's about people realizing their dreams, and so not only those founders realizing their dreams of running a business and having a successful business and being able to do that because they've got capital in through equity crowdfunding, but it's about a lot of these businesses are for good. They
Yes.
are they are, you know, again, there was evidence of this at the recent event in Santa Monica. There was a live pitch event there, and all three of the businesses there were businesses that were just so, um, inspiring to listen to what their mission, their story. Actually, they all three of those businesses that were, and if anybody hasn't seen it, there is a video out there that you can look at and see, and you'll be inspired because what they're trying to do, these businesses themselves are trying to make a difference. They need some capital to be able to help do it. They may not have been able to get it through the traditional route, so they've chosen to look at crowdfunding to finance their business. But these businesses, when they're successful, they will make a real difference. They'll make a real difference in so many ways, and you can see that actually with the amount of platforms that are operating, for example, just in sustainable energy projects or renewable energy projects.
Okay.
Certainly in Europe, there's a core group of platforms that are specialised in green, renewable, sustainable energy, for example, and I think it's the same in the States as well. So, and I genuinely think that I've reached the time of life where I'd like to think that what I'm doing is making a difference. And I think that doing what we're doing here, if we're able to achieve what we want to achieve, it will make such a difference. This has got I honestly think that equity crowdfunding or regulated investment crowdfunding it's got so much untapped potential to make a real difference in a positive way, and I'd like to be part of that, and that's why I'm sticking around and doing this because I think it needs some help as an industry, and I think we're starting to do that, and we're starting to collaborate, and we've got all the right people doing it, and if we make enough noise, I think we'll do something really special. And I don't think you can say that about, like, no offense to the insurance industry, but insurance, so that's why.
Sure. Sure. Uh, yes, I think of other industries that are powered off the insurance industry as well, and the whole ecosystem. But I'm on board with you. I wholeheartedly agree. And these impact investments, these
Yeah,
ideas that could change the world in a
yeah,
positive way with the right funding, and being able to do that very quickly, with a lot of energy behind it through the crowd. That's why I'm on board. That's why I'm a marketer and at the front lines of performance on these capital raise campaigns. How do you do it correctly? How do you do it effectively? I look at marketing. You said it's marketing exercise as a series of tests, growth at that, what are some things that founders, that issuers should test out to run a successful equity crowdfunding campaign?
That's a really good question. So, what are the KPIs that they should be looking at in terms of the?
Sure. Any recommendation for a founder, a marketer, could be an investor or a portal who's tuned in and working with issuers directly, but that they could test out for themselves. This could be how a deal's structured. This could be a marketing tactic. Take it anywhere
Yeah, I
you'd
mean,
like it, but what are some key factors?
I think probably the, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because again, you'll know far more about this from me. But I think when they're running the test the water campaign, that's going to achieve a lot of the signs, if you like, that things are going to work or not. And I think if
Pre-launch.
absolutely pre-launch. So if the signs are looking good and the noises that are being heard, even when they're just talking amongst their peers and their groups of they're sitting around and they're going, oh my God, that is a good idea. I can see where you're coming from here, and that kind of thing. I don't think that kind of thing should be ignored. That's almost a signal to sort of say, yeah, let's take this, that we might have something here. So I think listening to some of those smaller things that you might often, you might think that aren't important, they probably are quite important. The hunch factor, if you like, is a really good one, I think. I think obviously some of the research that's going to be done as part of the initial marketing campaign setup is going to be key. Surveys not just to investors, but also to other peers within the industry that the business is
Okay.
forming in, would also be incredibly valuable. So I think good primary research and secondary research as well. There's a lot of people that have done research out there which could obviously be far more cost effective than doing your own, that may actually be able to help you with your validating some of your theories and how effective your business model is going to be. And I think the other thing is just getting other experts involved as well, talking to people who are, you're not going to be an expert at everything as a founder, as you've already said. There's no way
Oh
you
yeah.
go into this. Most founders aren't going to go into this with the marketing knowledge needed to be able to put together a marketing campaign, for example. That's why they go to somebody like you. But there's other areas as well that people would be able to benefit from. I don't think there's any shame in going to people who are really, really au fait with those particular subjects. I mentioned, for example, there'd be no harm in going to an international tax expert, for example, if you're looking at bringing on board lots of international investors, to maybe have the deal structured in a way that's appealing to an international audience rather than just in the United States, for example. So I think getting the views and opinions of as many people as possible, no matter how sort of remote you might think they are from what it is that your actual business is doing, is incredibly valuable, and I wouldn't be ashamed to do that.
You want to bring in as many different perspectives as you can because this is a large scale campaign reaching countless different audiences.
Mm.
And I believe this research is crucial. And if we look at the success rates in the industry, there's room for improvement. They're already better than many, offline capital raising, verticals, if you will. But there's opportunity to see, higher success rates. And I think pre-launch test the waters really does tell you a lot. You're able to build an audience. You're able to take in reservations if formed
Yeah.
compliantly. You're able to test out messaging, get those signals that you're talking about. How, hey, these channels, these audiences, these creatives, these funnels we're taking them down are working better than the other variants. And good marketing, you want to make sure you're A/B testing and letting
Yep.
the data direct your decisions, not just gut instincts. You could test out around gut instincts, but you want to validate with the data, of course, and bringing in the experts, like you said, even if it's just for a conversation, but to make sure you're taking in different types of perspectives, implementing, like I said, we put out this information so it could be found during research, but listening to those signals. And what if a founder's doing that, they're running the test of waters, maybe they've even gone live, but they're not seeing the results that they're playing for? What are the best approaches towards optimization? And I find many groups will find themselves in this situation. Even the top issuers, I could tell you when they needed to optimize, when they had slower weeks, slower months. What are the best ways to manage one of these campaigns to a point of effectiveness to the goal benchmarks?
So I was going to initially say that actually everything goes back to what you were saying there, the test optimize scale. I know that's kind of your mantra, and I think doing that in every facet of the business, and then talking to
Mm,
people, and more importantly, listening to the feedback that you're getting. But
yes.
your question really is, well, what if they're doing that, but they're still not achieving the results? So are you sort of saying they've launched the campaign, and it's not doing what it should
Sure.
do?
And they need to pivot a little bit, something different rather than just accept those levels of performance or give up.
That's a really good question.
I
It's
find
not.
many founders, get to that level. So I like to talk about it. Sometimes I'll tune into a podcast or a webinar and it sounds too easy. Run
I
one of
think
these campaigns. They do great things. Run these channels. You're going to be, surpassing everything you need. But if it slows down, what are the best ways to turn that ship around and be able to sail to the goals?
Well, the first thing is something we talked about earlier. Um, Look at the marketing side of things. There's obviously something happening that's not quite hitting the mark from a marketing perspective. Either you're not quite targeting the right people, or your story's not quite targeting
Story.
the people that you've chosen. So I would look at talking to the people you're working with in the marketing side of things. I mean, they will obviously have flagged that. I mean, I'm assuming actually this is something that you will have experienced anyway. Um, so they will obviously have picked this up and be sort of on board with the fact that something isn't quite right here. Um, and there will be facets of that will need to be optimized even further. I know we're sort of saying that we've already done all of that and we've got, but I don't
Never
think you'd
ending.
ever get to the stage where you can't tweak something. Um, and it's a question for you, really. This will be
Okay.
educational from my perspective. Would it be worth actually going back to the platform that you're working with and explaining this situation and saying, look, this is what we're doing. You can see how we're operating. We've been very clear on the marketing that we're putting forward and the targeting, and get their advice. They might have a pool of investors that potentially they could bring to the table. They probably should have already done that, if but you never know. There must be something that the platform would be able to potentially help with. I'd be interested to get your feedback on that question.
Sure.
Actually, give me the answer.
Yeah. Well, speaking on behalf of the portals, they have to treat every issuer the same. So they'll go
Yeah.
back to the audience as different milestones are reached from a broad sense. So there's only so much they could do. I don't want founders to think, hey, just bug the portal, bug the partners you're working
Yeah.
with to reach more of an audience. There may be some fundamental aspects of what you're doing that can be shifted. And sometimes it's a 2-degree shift. I play golf. If you hit it 2 degrees to the right, two
Yeah.
degrees to the left. You may slice, you may fade, end up in the trees on either side of the
Small
fairway.
changes
It's
can make a
these
huge
slight,
difference. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I'll speak with founders that are stuck. They're in a tough situation, and whether we're working with them or not, if we're working with them, it's not just a matter of working harder. We'll put the time in, but if we could just do 1,000 push-ups and suddenly their campaign's working, we'd do it. We'd do it every time. We'd probably be in great shape as a result. But it's
Sure.
these aspects of who you're targeting, the story you're reaching them with, and the follow-ups that are occurring, because it's not going to be that first touch point. You may have a lot of people in the funnel. They just need that extra little excitement to create action. Maybe it's immediacy of the campaign's closing. We'll see a spike there quite a bit, but it's not the best answer to a founder who's looking to raise much more.
Yeah.
Let's
Sure.
move to a
Yeah.
closing and you're going to see more investments. I like to look at the movable pieces, what we can do, what we can't. We can make changes to what marketing channels we're running. Inside those marketing channels, and I mentioned this briefly earlier, but what audiences, what creatives, and what funnels we're taking them down. We could create new audience variants. Maybe we're going after the wrong people. Maybe the performance we have seen, that there's pockets of performance that we should be focusing on, the creative. And I go back to we have a whole strategy process for creating a marketing plan. You use the word research, competitor audits, where
Yeah.
what are the top groups in the space doing? I find the top 10% of issuers get all of the investments, relatively speaking. And if they're doing a webinar, a live event with a major guest, someone from Shark Tank, someone
Yep.
who's an industry expert in their space, someone who is an anchor investor and can talk about what motivated them to move forward and become a shareholder. There may be something there. Success leaves clues. There could be aspects of their campaign that could be incorporated, at least for a test, for the creative that you're running. The
So a
funnel
deep dive
on the
analysis
follow-up.
almost of what's worked. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and ultimately additional tests, but intelligent tests. So based on research, based on the signals, like you said, you're getting, looking at the movable elements. What do we want to roll back to test? And then what about scaling? Everyone's playing for scale. On a Reg CF, they want to hit the full 5 million, or maybe they're just going for 1.235 million, the amount before you need audited financials on a Reg CF. So they're going for that amount, but there's only so many companies that hit it. So do you have any success stories around scale or just recommendations? Hey, you're a founder, you're increasing things, you should attempt to do this
Well, look, I
while
mean,
taking you around to the next level.
one of the real obvious things from my point of view is maybe look at another jurisdiction. If you are doing everything right where you are at the moment, why not look at another jurisdiction that perhaps,
Working, take it to another jurisdiction. I
yeah,
like that.
you can select low hanging fruit here. So you wouldn't necessarily select a jurisdiction with a totally different language, for example. The costs and everything are going to be ridiculous for you to create all of your marketing materials. But actually, why not? Why not look at doing that? Certainly in the States
Yes.
where it's actually you could do that. Although we've talked about it being laborious, some of the things that we've already just talked about there are potentially laborious. And I think it would be an interesting conversation to have with a founder to say, look, we actually think what you're doing here is great, but we've got these suggestions you could do. But actually, have you thought about taking it to, I don't know, Canada or the UK or Ireland or whatever it might be, either directly or partnering with a platform in one of those jurisdictions as well. That might be something that could happen in the near future.
Mhm.
So that would be my obvious answer coming from where I come from.
I love it.
But yeah.
Yeah, and it hasn't been said. I asked these questions to every guest, upwards of 200 at this point. It hasn't been said in that fashion. We haven't mentioned Reg S and allowing for more international markets. We've worked on a good amount of Web3 campaigns over the years. Some had to exclude the US. Some were, global, but as marketers, it's, hey, we're going after these 3 countries. We're going after these 5. We can
Yeah.
add more as it's working, and
Absolutely.
like you're saying. So you've
It's
seen
about the
success.
managed scale, like you mentioned
Yes.
it. It's that scale. So yeah, you can do it in that way. And I don't think it's been said before because it's such an unusual concept, and this is the problem we've got. This is what we're trying to solve, that it shouldn't be an unusual concept. There's no reason why it has to be an unusual concept, and this is kind of why Gecka exists, going back to the beginning, if you like.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to strive to make it so that it isn't unusual, and it is an option, just a tick box option almost. You can do this, you can take your deal internationally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. You take it to larger stages, you take it to larger crowds. You've seen success, your Reg CF, your Reg A, maybe it's during, but let's make sure, we're speaking to the international tax experts, the
Yeah.
compliance, partners for any of these additional markets, but let's take it to larger stages. Cross-border capital raising. I think that's such a great, headline for our discussion here.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, look, almost to summarize where Gecka is at the minute, we've got sort of close near to 60 supporters now, actually, in the last year, which is great. It's platforms, experts, advisors. We've got some recent new exciting additions to the steering committee. We've got Scott McIntyre, who's actually recently agreed to join our steering committee. I know you know Scott.
Big Scott McIntyre fan.
Yeah. So he's going to be helping us out, which is fantastic. As I mentioned, we're looking for representation across all the jurisdictions. We're trying to get more active at events. We were over at the Eurocrowd event in Belgium in September. We were over in Supercrowd LA. We're taking part in the next Supercrowd online event, and we'd like to be involved in the CFPA event in October in Washington as well. That would be fantastic for us to come along to that, where I know that you've got regulators, at that event, which is going to be fantastic. So And we're supporting dialogue on, exit options, regulatory best practice, shared infrastructures, all that kind of thing. I think we're in a really good place to sort of take it to the next level. And if anyone's interested, please, pass on my details or however
Yeah.
you want to. We want to collaborate, not compete. That's the kind of the message that I want to get across from a Gecka perspective. And we welcome platforms, regulators, ecosystem builders. I don't know, anyone who's looking for a fairer, more accessible capital market. We'd love to talk to. And just on the Daxi chain side of things, we're actually running some pilot networks at the moment in the States and in Europe. So if anybody's interested in talking to me about that, I'd love to talk to them and just explain a little bit more about how that would work, and particularly looking for platforms in the States to take part in that. Not necessarily cross-border at this stage, but more about the collaboration piece and connecting platforms together in the States. So please, again, if you could pass on my details, Jason,
Yeah.
that would be amazing if anyone's
Could
interested.
even share them here. So get in touch with Gecka, scale your
Yep.
campaign to
Yep.
larger markets. If you're a service provider, industry expert, get in touch with Andy, see how we can collaborate towards competition together, but to take everyone to larger tides, if you will. Andy, where is the best place for them to go? Where should they learn more? And any final notes you want to leave everyone with today?
Yeah, sure. So the website is for Gecka is thegecka.org.
Okay.
Thegecka.org. And you'll see links to all of our sort of social channels on there. There's a newsletter you can sign up for. That will just send you all of our latest news every month. And we've got blogs, we've got podcasts. I actually host a podcast myself, and I'd like you to come onto that, Jason, at some stage soon.
Thank you. Let's do it.
And you'll have access to all of that. Like I said, all the social media channels are on there. And daxichain.com if you want to find out more about DaxiChain. And you can email me at andrew@thegecka.org. And you can email me about anything related to what we've talked about on here on that. And of course on LinkedIn. So just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with anybody involved in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone's got any questions at all, I think the key message I've probably gone on about it enough on here. Across everything that Gecka are doing is let's collaborate and not collaborate to compete. We need to collaborate in this industry if we're to take advantage of the potential that's out there, the untapped potential that's out there. And yeah, I would love to talk to anybody who's passionate about this, as passionate as I am, and I know you'll have lots of listeners who are. So yeah, I just want to say thanks for having me on as well. I've really enjoyed it, and
of course,
no doubt we'll talk further.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you on the podcast here. I know you are a stand for founders, for investors, and building this ecosystem. I think it's a very kind offer that you put your LinkedIn, your email out there. Could tell everyone, and he's very responsive on LinkedIn. Yep. So I would definitely take him up on that warm invitation. And Andy, again, I really enjoyed the discussion today. Looking forward to finding more ways to collaborate and work together. Maybe not towards competition, but just collaborate and get this story out to the appropriate parties in the space, and look forward to where this is all going to be. A year, 5, 10 years out, and I know
that's exciting, isn't it? What the future holds is exciting for you guys as well. Oh
yeah,
it's great.
I picture a space where there's hundreds of thousands, even millions of companies using these tools to meet people who can invest, who could become, users, ambassadors, if you will. So I'm committed to it. I know you are as well, and many other great folks on Gecka, the CFPA, these different events that we're a part of. So again, can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to spread the good word here today.
Thanks, Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. And thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Take care.